So I finally sat down and watched Avengers Endgame for the second time, and generally speaking, I still maintain that it's a good film, although not as slick as Infinity War. However, having had a chance to view it again, I've been able to more thoroughly identify the issues that the film has, of which there are quite a few. My frustration with Endgame is that it could have been an absolute classic. Instead, it's a bit messy in places, and it failed to do some of the characters the justice they deserved. In my review of Endgame from earlier this year, I explained some of the issues I had with the film, such as the fact that it suffered from being bogged down by far too much exposition, which is often common for cliffhanger resolution stories, and especially in stories involving complicated time travel plot devices. And I wasn't happy with how Natasha Romanoff was killed off. Also, I lamented the poor treatment of Thor. He becomes an alcoholic and a fat emotional wreck who loses his way, and it's all played for laughs, thus compromising the character and turning him into a bit of a joke. I had other complaints with the film also, but my second viewing of the film has allowed me to pinpoint the primary gripe I have with Endgame, the conclusion, specifically the final showdown with Thanos, how it was handled, and how he was defeated. I think I've got a perspective here that many people may not consider when it comes to how the MCU's biggest villain was finally overcome. All of that is coming up right after this. This video is sponsored by Audible. Audible boasts an unmatched selection of audiobooks as well as original audio shows, news, and comedy. If you're like me and you don't have a massive amount of time to sit down and read a physical book as often as you'd like to, Audible is an ideal solution. With Audible, you can listen to audiobooks on your way to work, in the car, while you're cooking, or in the gym. There's a wide selection of categories to choose from, so now you can be inspired by listening to that self-help book that you've been putting off reading, or educate yourself with some of the 14,000 historical audiobooks that are available, or, if you're like me and you're seeking some escapism from time to time, Audible has you covered, with a gargantuan number of sci-fi and action-adventure fiction audiobooks. I've been meaning to reread Ian M. Banks' Consider Phlebas from the Culture series novels. Now I can listen to the audio version. Go to audible.com/The Dave Cullen Show. The link is in the description box below, or text The Dave Cullen Show to 500 500 and start listening with an exclusive 30-day free trial, 1 free audiobook of your choice, and 2 Audible originals from an ever-changing list. Okay, welcome back. In the final earth-shattering showdown in Endgame, all of the ingredients were there for a fantastic conclusion, and in general, there is plenty to shout about. I loved that moment when Captain America says, "Avengers assemble," and it kicks off a big, epic battle with all of the Avengers from across the entire MCU franchise, and it's on the scale of something from Lord of the Rings. The problem really is that the big epic battle itself isn't all that unique or exciting. We already had such a huge epic battle at the end of Infinity War, which took place in Wakanda, and it was done much better than this. This Endgame battle is a bit of a dreary CGI mess with a dull, lifeless colour palette that ultimately leads to an unsatisfactory conclusion, and I also get a sense that there may have been too many cooks involved in the creative process here that compromised the emotional impact of the final showdown with Thanos. So, with 2014 Thanos now in the future and having just destroyed Avengers HQ in an aerial bombardment, Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man slowly make their way through the rubble to face him in what looks like it's going to be an awesome knockdown, drag-out fight with no holds barred. And for a little while, that looks like what we're going to get. The three heroes work together, throwing everything at Thanos. But one by one, they each get tossed aside. Iron Man gets knocked unconscious for an extended period of time, which is a great shame because although Tony Stark, being the main character of the film, is in plenty of the movie, he doesn't really suit up as Iron Man for much of the movie. He's mostly out of his suit for the film. Thor throws the kitchen sink at Thanos, and he also gets quickly bested. And then we get this epic moment where Captain America finally lifts Thor's hammer because he's now worthy. He must have not been quite so worthy in Age of Ultron. This was a glorious scene, but it's ultimately pointless. It all comes to nothing as Thanos gets the better of Steve Rogers shortly after. And then after that, Thanos' forces arrive on Earth, and then we have the big Lord of the Rings style battle with all of the resurrected Avengers emerging from portals. At the end of that big fight, we have one final battle between Thanos, Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America as they each try to stop him from using the Infinity Gauntlet, and unfortunately, Captain Marvel shows up to crash the party. Arguably, the ridiculously overpowered Carol Danvers delivers the biggest assault on Thanos, almost crushing his Infinity Gauntlet at one point, and he's so overwhelmed by her that he has to kind of cheat in order to beat her. He has to invoke the power of an entire Infinity Stone just to punch her away. This is how powerful she is. The problem is that Captain Marvel is, firstly, too powerful, and secondly, she's a newcomer who hasn't really earned her place in the eyes of fans. When Scarlet Witch batters Thanos earlier in the battle, it has much more emotional resonance because she's earned her place. She's a well-established character, having been really well introduced in Age of Ultron, along with some solid development in Captain America Civil War and Infinity War. She also has something to avenge, the death of her beloved Vision. Captain Marvel feels very shoehorned into the film, in an effort that feels designed to help establish her as the future of the franchise. But this Thanos battle wasn't her fight, and she just feels like an interloper. Despite her screen time being kept to a minimum, she was still out of place in this film. Tony finally gets his hands on the Infinity Stones, and using a new gauntlet built into his suit, he delivers a suitably poignant final line and a callback to the first film, "I am Iron Man," before snapping his fingers and turning Thanos and his armies to dust. Tony dies shortly thereafter. Though this certainly works as a conclusion, I still think it was the wrong way to go. First things first, if there has to be a big epic battle between the Avengers and Thanos' forces, then by all means have at it. But they should have had a separate battle between Thanos, Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, and the Hulk happening simultaneously elsewhere, possibly nearby. This would have been the primary battle, and because it's on a smaller scale than the other one, it would have made a greater emotional impact. I mention Hulk because it's worth noting that he never got to have a rematch with Thanos after his trouncing in Infinity War. Instead, Hulk is neutered in Endgame and merged with Bruce Banner. The CGI Professor Hulk is fantastic, but I think this was the wrong way to go. The essence of what made Hulk a thoughtless, brutal animal is gone, and so too is what made him fun. In fact, with the exception of a couple of smashes, Hulk is practically anonymous in the final battle. He should have been fighting against Thanos side by side with Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America, and I suspect his role in the final fight was sacrificed a little and given to Captain Marvel instead, which wouldn't surprise me. This leads me to the next problem with this battle. This is going to sound strange, but I don't think Thanos was really defeated. His plans and his minions were defeated. Yes, he was killed, but he wasn't really beaten in any meaningful way. He was turned to dust by the Infinity Gauntlet, but that's not quite the same thing. The problem is that Thanos was suddenly massively powerful again and unbeatable in the end fight, making all of the efforts of the Avengers completely pointless. He always gets the upper hand in the end, and that's the issue. Nobody managed to actually physically match him and overpower him, which is what most people really wanted to see. They wanted this guy to have his ass kicked. Captain Marvel and Scarlet Witch came the closest, but no one managed to beat him in a fair fight, and that's important because Thanos' biggest advantage is his physical strength. He's physically imposing and highly dangerous. So in the end, the only way to stop him was to kind of cheat and to use his own plan against him, to use the Infinity Stones to turn him to dust because no one was strong enough to physically defeat him. And we don't really get to see him acknowledge that he's been bested. He just sits there and turns to dust. It's all a bit anticlimactic. Now, I acknowledge that Batman didn't get the kill shot on Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, but he should have done. Nevertheless, it didn't really matter because he got the next best thing. He physically bested him when he returned to Gotham. He was trounced earlier in the film, beaten to a pulp by Bane, and then sent to a prison he was expected to never climb out of. Bruce Wayne couldn't hope to defeat Bane because he'd come from a very different world, a world of opulence and decadence. Bane was a savage, born and raised in darkness. Bruce Wayne had to rebuild himself again, fall into that darkness, and then climb out of it to emerge better and capable of fighting harder and stronger in his rematch with Bane, and thus he managed to immobilize him. This should have been the way Thanos was defeated, not through Infinity Stone trickery, but by Hulk, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor working together to kill him in open combat, even if it cost one of them their lives. This would have been a much more heroic final fight for all four of them, as it would have required them to dig deep and do the seemingly impossible, to overcome the thing that makes Thanos so devastating, his massive physical strength. It's not like the Avengers hadn't managed to physically incapacitate Thanos before. They actually did it in Infinity War, and they did it at the beginning of Endgame, albeit again with the assistance of Captain Marvel, unfortunately. And Thor did kill him by cutting off his head. So it's not like using the Infinity Gauntlet was the only way to stop him. In the final season of Angel, the character of Hamilton is introduced, and he's the senior partner's representative on Earth, and he's just unstoppable. Even Illyria gets pummeled by him. In the final fight in Wolfram and Hart, Angel is getting thrown around the office like a rag doll. He's completely overpowered, and it's looking pretty grim. But Hamilton lets slip his Achilles heel, revealing that his blood is filled with the ancient power of the wolf, ram, and hart. Angel lunges at him and proceeds to drink his blood and thus increases his power to match that of Hamilton's. This ultimately makes it a fair fight between the two men, with Angel landing the killer blow. This is the way that Thanos should have been beaten, because the character was so assured of his own physical dominance over everybody else that if he had have been physically defeated in a fight, then it would have provided an extra level of closure to the character's story arc. He needed to be trounced and physically subdued. That's unfortunately not what we got here. The Avengers couldn't beat him, so they had to make him disappear forever. That's kind of how it feels. Endgame still works as a fitting conclusion to this saga of the MCU, but I would question the execution and some of the creative decisions. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Dave Cullen Show is on YouTube, and it's also mirrored over on BitChute. And if you'd like to support my work, that's very much appreciated. You can follow the links below. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.